Emco Unimat servicing, removing the motor. The motor on this works. Okay, so the milling head is off the column, and you don't need to remove this, but this is the clamping bolt that goes through this part to clamp it onto the column. Now what I want to do is actually take this piece off because it makes everything a little bit lighter from the quill. And so what I'm doing is taking out these set screws either side. These ride up and down in slots on the quill. As far as I know, I've not had it off on an Emco before, but if it's similar to other things. There we go, it ends up with a pin. There's one on each side of those. Look at the other one. And this bolt, which has a hex head on the other side, is slackened, so this component here is no longer clamped onto the quill. It's not actually clamped tight onto it because, of course, the handle, which goes through there from the other side, if I switch it over, which sort of handle, either of those two sorts of handles will go into there to raise and lower that. And so that's the other pin, which will hopefully allow me to turn it off, and that bolt there in the center of the video is the one that I've just slackened off a bit more to make it looser on there. This pin should be loose enough to take out now, and so if I take that out and get the yellow part off, so I'll just pause there. You can see amongst all the mess, it's relatively light because that's aluminium. The collet chuck is heavier, and so that's been unscrewed from the end of this. I'm going to make a note of that thread size. I don't know if that's M14 by 1 on here, but it would be useful to know. And so that's off there. Now, the motor, I've already started on this, and basically I've undone the set screw. It's in the middle of the pulley. As far as I can tell, the pulley is keyed onto the shaft and therefore should pull off the shaft. You can't take this box, belt cover box off with that on, with the pulley on. But when you open the cover, you can see that there are two nuts. Well, there's one, bolt and one set screw holding it on. I've taken the set screw out. I think that's the set screw from there, and the washer. Find the washer in a minute. And then at the other side, you need to use this smallest spanner that you get in the kit, which is it 8mm? That's 8mm to undo the nut, but you don't have to take the nut out the other side, just slacken it off, and it's got a shaped hole in this casing, which it comes free from. And I'll show you the shaped hole in a moment, but I need to prise the pulley off the shaft. Well, that was a great relief. So the pulley, I was able to just use a large screwdriver, get it underneath, give it a slight twist, and it pulled the pulley up. There it is, the spline thing on. And so this aluminium pulley is in there now. Can be taken out, so the pulley has come off there. So I can take my fingers out of the way. And here, with this off, you keep touching something and the camera goes off. So you can see this other screw. So you've got two screws that hold it on, which is easy to see now. If I go down here, that one is a shaped hole, and it goes over this one here, which, as I say, we've got the spanner in the kit to fit it. And this is the slot, and you can get to the Allen screw there, okay, to undo that one, which allows you then, once you've prised the pulley, to detach the motor. Right, okay, you can do what you want with the motor now. Set it aside. I'm going to set it aside. The motor works perfectly well. Nothing wrong with that. The reason I've done that is because this part here is distorted. It's got distorted in transit. I bought this off someone, and I think you can see there, maybe, the level of distortion. I'll do some stills. So hopefully you can see the level of distortion. I'm hoping that while it's off there, rather than doing anything else, I can get that back to something like the flatness it needs to be, so that the motor and the spindle are both in line. They're quite a long way out of line. So some sort of knock whilst in transit has knocked against the side of the motor or the sides of the quill and has bent this. It's only 2mm steel, but it's given. Better if things give. And the plastic lid cover for the belts is undamaged, which is a good bit. So I'm hoping I can get that back. Now, to get the plastic belt cover, you have to be able to drift these pins out far enough to get hold of them with a pair of pliers and extract them. And so I've got to drift the other pin out first. So you just need something you can get inside there just to drift it a little. It's not protruding enough to grab hold of with the pliers, but once I've drifted it enough, I will be able to. Now the spindle seems to spin quite well. There's a little bit of friction, it doesn't spin, you know, won't carry on spinning for a long time. But just to give some example of age, if I look at the hole for the drifting thing, you can see distortion around the edges of the hole, rounding of the hole at the top and bottom edge, and that you see the slight raising there, distortion where the Tommy bar has levered against the end. The thread appears to be in reasonable condition, but most importantly, I can't detect any play. I mean, not physically any play. I don't know what the run out or anything is because I've not run it, but there's no wobble or play in it at all. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is, of course, you got the loading spring. Get the light in the right place. I don't know if you can see a spring in there, but the spring is trapped a centimetre or so from the bottom. Bottom end's compressed. But look at the spring on the other side. It's fully expanded all the way to the bottom. So it looks like the spring is skew-whiff in there. I don't know at what point that arose, but it's as if the spring is not evenly set up all the way down. That might just be something that's happened as I've taken it apart and will correct itself once it's operating. But there we see the spring in that one slightly compressed up inside the, what do you call it, this quill thing the spindle runs in. Just done a little bit of checking on the box that covers the belts and which joins the motor to the spindle quill. This bottom plate is fairly near, but if you put a tri-square on here, move it out to there, you find that this is a millimetre, well, possibly 2 millimetres distorted up there. Clearly this top plate is a lot further off. So the first thing is, it would be better to bring this bottom one in line. Anyway, what I'm thinking is just take this hex set screw out, get this clamped up in a vise that might squeeze those in, and that might help, and then see if there's any way of putting some gentle pressure on this just to bring that perpendicular to that. And then if that's straight, see if we can bring this down so that the motor, when it sits on there and is fastened onto there, is in the same line as that. So that's the challenge, to restore this to a better condition. trying to use my forensic skills, do you see the top of that pin? And the grinding that's taken place on this sheet steel here. It looks just as though that might have been repaired, welded after manufacture, because surely at manufacture it would have been overall sprayed or treated with the black, and it just looks as though that's possibly had a bit of weld on it. Not a problem really there, which has then been ground down afterwards. Can you see the grinding marks on it and how the rest is all black, as if that's been welded and then the weld ground off. Just a thought. It is what it is. My main issue is getting it straight. Not the most difficult of engineering jobs. I hope you can see that top plate that the motor goes onto is a bit flatter. So it's a matter of clamping this into a woodworking vise like that. A couple of taps with a mallet with a block in between. So this was perpendicular to this. So that was a square up there. And then packing against the high spot of here with a washer and clamping in the vise. Because it's steel is springy, you almost have to move it beyond the point at which you want it to end up. There's no point having just two parallel things and squeezing and hoping it would end up parallel. You just need to push it beyond. So now, when resting on a flat plate, I had a metal plate in there to rest it on. So the bits that let's have a look down there. The bits that the motor clamped to are on a flat plate. Then checking that the shaft, so the shaft, it's going to be difficult to hold the camera and do it at the same time. But if this is all on a flat plate, and that's where the motor would be bolted to, that the shaft is in line. So when the motor's planted on there, you've got it more or less in line. And I checked that with, well, you just use something to make sure the gap is the same all the way up. So it's more or less on the same plane. Holding this down so that the places where the motor mounts are, flat onto your plane that you're measuring from. And then you can check that gap up there. And that's, approximately, as I say, not no secret of engineering things, within a millimetre or so. So the motor and the spindle should now be in line when they're put back together. So that's effected an improvement, quite an improvement in this. Almost complete. This is looking reasonably successful in terms of, if you can tell, well, this top plate is a lot flatter. A few things I'm not quite so clear about. It was very tricky putting the back bolt in, which has got a spacer, that's a cylinder, and some washers. And it felt to me as though one of those washers should go underneath this. That's the thing that's down there. There you are, I can just see the nut head down there. So I've got a washer underneath, there's a spacer, and fiddling that about so that the spacer went through the washers so that the bolt would go in tight enough to tighten up. Was a little bit tricky, but anyway, that's now in place. That struggled with that because you've got to have the pulley on to a certain extent. Then that one goes in, and of course, when I took that out, that nut that's on there at the back is spanner worn. I am not the first person to undo it. It's been undone a couple of times, so certainly this has been played with a little bit, enough to have that in and out a few times. This one at the front had no washers, and it possibly could do with a thin washer underneath as well as a washer on top. But there we go. Now, what I've got is the 2 pins and the Allen key head screw, which will attach the door, the plastic cover for the belt. I've got the belt over there, so the belt can go back on. What's missing is the Allen screw, the small Allen screw that goes into the pulley that pulls the pulley onto the shaft. It's keyed onto the shaft. Come back from there. Classic, isn't it? Can't find my little screw that goes into there. That's the locking lever to go into here. Lock it onto there. That's gone into there. I've leveled up the spring in there. The spring was twisted sideways. I don't know why it was twisted sideways, but that's better. This is down at the bottom. It doesn't slide up and down there. Before putting these in, and therefore feeling the spring, I was able to feel how well this slides up and down the, whatever they call that, the quill or so. And it wasn't the easiest. I put some lubrication inside this, so it will tend to work into the bearings, to lubricate the bearings, and keep the spring lubricated. Might even leak out onto this and lubricate this, but it certainly moves up and down reasonably well with the bar. I can crank it up and down, but you know, it wasn't the smoothest of movements there, and I've not pinched that up at all. That was totally unpinched. Right, so all I need is to find my missing screw that would go into the end of the shaft. It would be a screw and set screw and washer. No idea where that is at the moment. It's only a small one because I was using the smallest Allen key on there to undo it. That will fasten that pulley on. I want to get that on, get the belt on, and then I can put the cover back on there, and that is restored so that the motor is now in line with the spindle and quill, and that will be a lot better. That's taken me an evening to do, and it's been interesting to find out a little bit more about this part of the mechanism and just reassure myself that this bit is well, seems to be running as well as I would expect. Thank you. I hope that's of some use to anybody. If there's anything else you want to know and I can answer that, do ask a question, and I'll be posting more videos of my experiences with a Unimat 5, I believe it's called, a compact 5 lathe and mill head, and I believe the same mill head is found on the Emco Compact 8 or Emco 8. A little update, I found the bolt and washer that goes into the end of the pulley, managed to tighten that on. I found the washer that went under the end of that, and also a piece of packing. I've put 2 pieces in, so not a washer this side, but piece of semi-resilient packing, i.e. card or something like that, which matches the thickness of the washer at the other side. So that is all now on there and ready to run nicely. I don't think I need to plug it in to it running, but that's much improved. A useful evening, or afternoon, should I say, useful afternoon. The camera distorts things, but now we've got a motor which is more or less in line with the spindle. It doesn't look it through this camera, but I assure you that the plate work there is definitely flatter and more in line than it was. And now the case even closes better. I mean, this door closes nicely and fits. And this was something which wouldn't turn before. And is now running nicely. Success. I'm pleased with that. So that is correcting the misalignment between this and the motor. That was presumably caused in transit, as this was shipped from the person I bought it from.